Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor stunned the American people. 18 ships had been sunk, 170 planes destroyed, and more than 2,000 servicemen killed. The Japanese also attacked key locations in Asia and the Pacific. There seemed to be no way to stop the advancing forces of the rising sun.
No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
President Roosevelt pressed for a way to strike back, and 4 months after Pearl Harbor, on April 18, 1942, Colonel Jimmy Doolittle led his daring raid on Japan. 16 land-based Army bombers flew from an aircraft carrier on a mission that had only a slim chance of success. In the bombardier's compartment of plane number 16, Jacob DeShazer, bent on revenge, was flying into history with the Doolittle Raiders, but also into nearly 3.5 years of hell on earth as a prisoner of the Japanese. Incredibly, he survived. But the most amazing part of his story is what happened to make him the gentleman who returned to Japan after the war with a message of love and forgiveness for the people he had hated. Jacob DeShazer's extraordinary journey from vengeance to forgiveness. Jake was 2 years old when his father died. Before his 5th birthday, his mother married a 47-year-old bachelor named Hiram Andrus. When she and her 4 young children moved to his wheat farm near Madras, Oregon, it was a big change for everyone. A typical day on the farm began with early morning chores, feeding and milking, followed by breakfast together and family worship at the table.
My dad would read a chapter from the Bible. Then we'd all kneel at our chairs, and my dad and my mother would lead us in prayer.
Before school, the children delivered milk to homes in the town of Madras. Everyone in the family worked hard. Jake loved animals, and he was always ready for a little adventure. Jake graduated from high school in 1931 during the Great Depression. There was no money to send him to college or trade school, so he helped on the family farm, and with his brother Glenn, worked odd jobs for neighbors. In 1936, Jake found work in the Surprise Valley of Northern California near Eagleville. For 2 years, he worked as a camp tender, using pack mules to take food and supplies to the Basque sheep herders in the Warner Mountains and the high desert of Nevada. He learned to bake bread in a Dutch oven buried in the coals of a sagebrush fire. For weeks at a time, he would be alone, but he didn't seem to mind. It was a good life, and he was happy to be on his own. He was away from home and choosing his own course.
He and Glenn had almost completely quit going to Sunday school and church with us.
In Butte Falls, Oregon, Jake tried raising turkeys for a year, but when the price dropped at selling time, he lost everything. At the age of 27, he needed money and a job. So, in February 1940, he joined the Army Air Corps, where he trained as an airframe mechanic and later as a bombardier. Assigned to Pendleton Field, Oregon, Jake became a crew member on the Mitchell B-25 bomber. In December 1941, he had no idea that events unfolding in the Pacific would change his life forever.
He was on KP duty. He was peeling potatoes. And he heard the news on the radio, and he said, those Japanese, they're going to have to pay for this. He was very angry with what they had done.
At the same time that the Pearl Harbor attack was going on, plans were being made by the Japanese to attack Guam and the Philippines.
The Japanese are running wild. They've swept down from Japan. They've captured the Dutch East Indies. They've captured Singapore, the greatest defeat in British history. The Japanese captured these Brits and they treated them bad. 140,000, give or take a few, at Singapore. They captured Burma. They were moving down south. The Philippines. MacArthur shall return. He's defeated. You have the Death March. They were running wild.
President Roosevelt in the White House was extremely upset by the developments that happened out there. And he kept asking the Navy and the Air Corps, can't we do something to fight back? We've got to retaliate in some way to show that we can and will fight back. Captain Francis Lowe, who was on the staff of Admiral King of the Navy, Chief of Naval Operations, happened to be flying down to Norfolk. And he saw some Army bombers taking off from one of the practice fields that the Navy used there near Norfolk that was the same length as a carrier. And he wondered, could Army bombers take off from a carrier?
To find out, the chief of the Army Air Corps called on Colonel Jimmy Doolittle.
And he took on the task from General Arnold to find out if a B-25, or any other model we had could take off from a carrier.
Well, it was an impossible thing, really. You had the B-25s and you're taking off from an aircraft carrier, and no one had ever done anything like this before.
I think that Colonel Doolittle, to begin with, was the only man that could have done what he did. He was quiet, he was unassuming, he was a very intense listener, and he knew how to persuade people, and rightly so, because he had the ability to figure out things that he needed to do, and he wasn't in the habit of spending a lot of time thinking about things that weren't going to work out.
When Jimmy Doolittle was assigned the task to perform this mission, he sat down at a tablet and wrote out the things that he had to do or had to be done in order to carry it out.
My grandfather was a very well-educated man. It's something a lot of people don't know about him. He had a reputation, especially in those early days, as a daredevil, but he actually had his doctorate of science in aeronautical engineering from MIT. In fact, his was the first doctorate issued from MIT in aeronautical engineering.
I think the best title that they gave, the Master of the Calculated Risk. So he made a risk and he calculated how to do it, and he mastered it.
And figured that if the carrier could get a plane load of B-25s to within 450 miles of Japan, that the aircraft could then be flown, bomb targets in 5 cities in Japan, and then proceed to China, to a safe landing strip in China. When the squadrons had moved to Columbia, South Carolina, he sent out the word he wanted volunteers for a very dangerous mission.
He didn't say where we were going or anything about that, but he just said he had a job to perform.
Almost the whole group volunteered. I think it was mainly because the living conditions weren't that good. They had to get the heck out of here.
And then my dad was one of the last ones, and he was planning on saying no the whole time. But by the time everybody was saying yes, he said he was too chicken to say no.
Everything was dangerous in those days. War had been declared, and the whole process of living was, you were in danger to go somewhere, wherever you went. And I couldn't think of anything better than to go with somebody as capable as General Doolittle.
At Eglin Field, Florida, the B-25s were modified with extra fuel tanks to increase their range, while the crews trained for a mission so secret even they didn't know what it was.
I don't think we understood what our mission was, except that we were going to go to the Far East. We just didn't talk about that. We just talked about the fact that we had to get ready and to get the airplanes ready and to do a certain thing with the airplanes. One of them was to take it off in a short distance, and the other was to fly it as far as it would go.
The most difficult part of the takeoff was not to get the nose too high, because you would drag the tail, and that would decelerate the aircraft to the point of you couldn't get off in the required short distance. We had approximately 400 feet.
The B-25 carried 5 crew members. It had the pilot, and then the co-pilot, the navigator, the bombardier, and a gunner for the top turret. Our bombardier, of course, was up in front, and since we were flying low level, we had Ross Greening, one of the pilots, developed a small aluminum angle affair that he could use as a bomb sight. It cost 25 cents. And that's what every bombardier used on the mission. Because of the more amount of plexiglass around him, the bombardier was more exposed than the rest of the crews. Of course, if you're getting shot at, why, everybody's in an exposed position.
After 3 weeks of training at Eglin Field, the crews were ordered to fly their planes to California, where 16 B-25s were loaded onto the aircraft carrier Hornet. They sailed under the Golden Gate Bridge on the night of April 1st, 1942.
After we boarded the carrier and were 2 days out to sea, Captain Missionary came on a PA system and said, "This force is bound for Tokyo."
The Hornet was joined by a task force of ships, including the aircraft carrier Enterprise, the flagship of Admiral William F. Halsey. Together, they sailed toward Japan. The aircraft commanders were briefed on the 5 Japanese cities where they would drop their bombs. Then, they selected their targets: naval facilities, fuel storage tanks, factories, and warehouses.
We had 4 bombs, 500-pound bombs, 2 500-pound high explosives, and 2 firebombs.
The aircraft were then to proceed to a base in China, near Chuchao, and would be refueled and then flown to Chongqing. But as we know now, of course, the mission did not go as planned. Although the carrier was to try to get the aircraft within 450 miles of Japan, they were discovered about 650 miles out by a picket boat.
The thing that most all of us heard that woke us up was the cruisers immediately opened up and sunk the picket ship, and that got everybody ready for breakfast, I think. After they sunk the picket ship, they announced for the Army people to man their planes. So the only thing to do then was grab your B-4 bag and head for the airplane.
So Doolittle decided they would go, and Halsey gave them the order to go. So the B-25 started their takeoffs, and Doolittle was first.
He was just a leader. He didn't say, "Follow me," he just went, and you went. You wanted to go with him and do what he said.
Colonel Doolittle ran the engines up to full max power. I put down the full flaps and opened up the cowl flaps on the engine. At that point, we were ready to go. The deck officer waited until we came up on kind of a crest of a wave, and then he gave us a signal to start rolling. And by the time we got to where we were about ready to break ground, the ship itself dropped out from underneath us, and we were airborne.
The fellas that followed them, when they saw the old man go off, they knew they could make it. But of course, a lot of them had doubts. And but one by one, they took off.
We were number 16. The first aircraft was off at 8:20 a.m. and we were 1 hour later at 9:20 a.m., 60 minutes between number 1 and number 16. Well, Bill Farrer was pilot, I was co-pilot, George Barr was navigator, and Harold Spatz was engineer. Then Jake DeShazer was bombardier. We just wondered if everybody was going to make it, and everybody in front of us made it, so we were positive that we could make it.
We went individually. We didn't have contact with anybody. We took off individually and just made our way to where we were supposed to go without reference to anybody else.
We thought we would probably be welcomed with quite a bit of enemy activity, but fortunately, at high noon, which we arrived there, they had just finished an air raid exercise, and I believe that helped us. We did run into anti-aircraft, which was active, but it wasn't accurate. It jostled us around a bit.
We were on our own. We had no contact with anybody. The only thing we could do was listen to radio stations that were broadcasting for direction, ADF. We were without radio contact.
We flew between 100 and 200 feet on the whole mission, except for the bombing run, which was like the book says, 30 seconds. We pulled up to 1,500 feet and dropped the bombs. After the bombing mission run, we went back down on the deck and flew maybe 100 miles south of Japan, and then turned southwest and flew along the chain at low level and arrived over China at dusk. They had planned to have a homing station at Chuchao, which is our place where we were supposed to land and gas up. And it was never, it never arrived. The weather was bad. We had no place to land. And also the Chinese heard our engine, and they thought it was a Japanese air raid, and they turned off all the electricity. So we were at 9,000 feet running out of fuel. And the only thing to do was fly until you ran out of fuel and bail out.
Well, it was 14 hours or more after we'd left the carrier, and the airplane just stopped. The engines quit, so the crew bailed out, and I followed them.
At the time when we bailed out, we were in instrument conditions, and it was raining and real foggy, and it was some kind of experience. We bailed out from about 8,000 feet. All of us landed in different parts of rice paddies, and I fractured my ankle, my right ankle, and I had a hard time walking.
Of the 16 planes that carried out the raid, 1 flew to Russia, 2 ditched off the Chinese coast, 1 crash-landed safely, and the other crews bailed out over China. 3 of the raiders died that night from injuries. The next morning, those who survived began walking, most of them alone.
There was a I don't know whether it was a soldier or what he was. He didn't have any kind of uniform. But it turned out, I guess, he was a guerrilla. And we went to some distance to another building and walked in, and there was Colonel Doolittle. I said, "Boy, am I glad to see you."
Many friendly Chinese civilians risked their lives to help the raiders reach safety.
We cannot travel on the open road because that road is being patrolled by the Japanese, so we can only take the back road, the mountain trails. So that's difficult. Only can travel